Hey, folks. Welcome. Great to have you coming into the room here. Ryan and I were just talking about our April Fool's Day plans for Substack, so stay tuned. You only have to wait. You only have to wait 6 months for those exciting developments. Great to have people here, and for Treason subscribers, wonderful to have you join. And if you're not already following Ryan, please do follow Telos News, and we'll just jump into it today. Ryan,
The
one of the
same, and I
things.
should start. Good to see you again, Miles. And I should just add to that. Obviously, any people who are coming, any subscribers coming to this via Telus News, obviously, you should be subscribing uh, to Miles Taylor's Substack.
Love it, my friend. So many things to talk about. One topic that may be worth us jumping into at the top end is what's happening with Comey. And this is especially relevant. I think it will be especially relevant this week because, as Carol Leonnig over at MSNBC reports, there's the likelihood that as soon as tomorrow, they will indict John Bolton and potentially Friday. I mean, that's the current scuttlebutt that I'm hearing, and that means there's going to be renewed attention on these retribution cases the president has brought, but James Comey has already, and he and his lawyers have already
Yeah,
started to lay out what that pathway is going to look like to fight back against these charges. Ryan, what are you seeing on that front?
yeah. I mean, look, this is not a fair fight in some ways. The legal team, Pat Fitzgerald, is a terrific lawyer. The Justice Department's team, this U.S. attorney who might not actually even be the U.S. attorney. These are, you know, uh, not the greatest lawyers in America, and I
It's
think
very generous of you.
most legal observers think this case is going to crumble. Not that Trump cares. I mean, this is designed to embarrass him, to force him to spend money. Although I don't know what his arrangement is with Pat Fitzgerald. Maybe it's being done pro bono, and suck up his time and attention. And if you look through the filings, there's been a lot of motions going. There's been motions going back and forth. Eastern District of Virginia is known for keeping things on track, and they call it the rocket docket. The judge wants this case to go to trial on January 5th, so it's all going to happen pretty fast. And in the early motions, I mean, there's not a whole lot of news, but what comes out, if you look at it really closely, um, is that the judge has very little patience for the DOJ so far, and on the procedural issues that they're dealing with right now in terms of discovery and and how to deal with classified information. Um, to the extent that there have been little volleys back and forth, uh, Comey has won all of those so far. It's still early in the case, but it's sort of what you would expect. Um, Halligan and the Department of Justice don't seem ready for the case. That's frustrated the judge already. He's had to, give them a sort of finger wagging about that. And you see in these very, very early stages, Fitzgerald and Comey just setting up the big motions that we're going to get soon, whether the U.S. attorney is legally allowed to be the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District, and they've got a strong case that she is not. Um, and then, second, of course, is the vindictive prosecution um, uh, motion, and those are two like cannon blasts that will just destroy the case right out of the gates. So I think that's what you should be watching for right now. If those if the prosecution survives those motions and this does end up going to trial, as you know, and a lot of legal observers have pointed out, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to prove. But just my gut tells me, knowing a little bit about this judge, about the district, and the way that things have gone so far, this whole thing's going to crumble spectacularly. That is my prediction, that it's never going to go to trial. One of these motions, throwing out the U.S. attorney or throwing out the case, is going to be successful. And in the meantime, unless they play fast and loose, which obviously you can't rule out, the discovery that's going to be produced on this vindictive prosecution front. Now, look, part of the discovery is just Donald Trump's public statements. You don't need to take discovery for that. But they're going to ask for communications between the White House and DOJ, communications beyond the public ones between the president, Halligan, the attorneys that were fired and thrown off the case, the FBI agent that was apparently fired because he wouldn't perp walk Comey, and just all of the traffic inside Pam Bondi's circle about whether to pursue this case or not. And it's not a sure thing that discovery will ever become public, but some of it certainly might. And I think there's going to be quite a story. So maybe on the optimistic note, the fact that this case goes forward and that all sort of gets revealed and exposed. I don't know. I'm probably being a little optimistic here, Miles, but maybe something good could come out of this if the public understands what a vindictive prosecution means and how contrary to the norms of the DOJ that is, how difficult that is to prove. And if he successfully proves it, and on the face of it, sure looks like he's got a strong case, maybe you can put the genie back in the bottle a little bit with with the sort of destruction of the Justice Department over the last 8 or 9 months. So that's a long way of saying that, like, the courts and the lower courts, not the Supreme Court, remain one of the final bulwarks against the erosion of democracy in this country. And maybe it will have been proven, maybe it will prove to be deeply unwise for Bondi and the president to pursue this. You could probably go on the same rant about Letitia James and the upcoming
just copy paste, yeah,
Bolton prosecution, because these cases don't seem very strong, and on the face, they're obviously driven just by personal animus. And you know something about that.
I do, and happy to get into that. Although I do have to ask Ryan. I think the listeners here want to know. There is a puppy that wants attention somewhere in your room. What kind of dog?
You hear that?
We want to know what kind of dog. We want that good boy to get all the love that good boy needs.
Let me see if I can get him over. Bodie, come here, Bodie. Bodie is an English Cocker Spaniel. He's 7 months. He's 7 months today. And,
so he is a puppy still.
He's a puppy, and my son is bringing him over here. This could he could just jump up and mess this whole setup up, but he doesn't want to play right now. And today's his 7-month birthday, so he's 7 months, and he just got back. He just got back from 2 weeks of training camp out at a farm in rural Virginia. And
nice.
As I was telling people on another live the other day, he's like a whole new dog.
Oh, look at him.
Yeah, say hi. Bodie, say hi. You want to say hi? Do you want to say hi?
Hi, Bodie.
He can't tell if that's the camera, but
see how you can't be that upset about the state of the world when you got a pup like that.
I'm telling you, man, this pup, we got him this year, and he's gotten me through some dark times covering this shit.
and apologize for bringing up the non sequitur, but that's the beauty about doing this instead of cable news, is we can talk about the real world. I will say similarly, Ryan, 5 years ago, after the chaos of January 6th and everything that happened in that window, a few weeks later, Hannah and I got a mini Aussie doodle named Martini. And man, there was nothing that helped just get beyond that crazy window than that little dog, especially in the beginning, because you have to devote so much attention. There's no time to navel gaze. There's no time to think, woe is me, things are so crazy. That little guy is going to pee and poop everywhere if you are not paying attention. That was a great thing.
I didn't know we had this in common, but boy, I did not know the commitment. This is my first dog.
Yeah.
and I had no idea how it was going to kick my ass, and really, frankly, not that much different than having a newborn baby.
Yeah.
And you've done both very recently. And, my kids are older, 16 and 18, and boy, it just brought me right back to the time, when they were babies, and I live in an apartment building, so, like, you have to get up in the middle of the night, multiple times in the night, bring this dog down to pee and poop, and, maybe they make it, through all that without doing it in the lobby or the elevator.
Yeah.
And, you know, weeks of not sleeping, my productivity just, like, took a nosedive. But he's kinda out of the all of those difficult puppy phases now, and is just, the best dog in the world, and brings, like, so much joy every day.
You took the advice. It was Harry Truman's advice, right? If you need a friend in Washington, get a dog. You took
Yeah,
that advice. I
yeah.
took that
Say hi.
advice.
Say hi.
Let's see him.
This is Bodie,
Hi, buddy.
everyone.
Ah,
Bodie.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Look at that
BOD.
pup.
Shy. Say hi. He doesn't know where, the camera is.
Hi,
Alright.
Bodie. You're gonna think I'm crazy for saying this. I loved the experience of getting a puppy and raising it so much that when Hannah was, I don't know, 8 months pregnant, I had this insane idea, and I said, I think Martini really needs a girlfriend,
Yeah.
and just a buddy or a sister, whatever you wanna characterize it as. And I pitched her really hard on going to get another mini Aussie Doodle puppy, and ultimately, timing-wise, it just didn't work out because we wanted to stay close to home in preparation for baby being born. And now in hindsight, we didn't get another dog. In hindsight, I realize how insane that was to
That would have been
even
just
think
crazy.
we should have had a puppy and a newborn baby at the same time. I mean, as Jonah Goldberg always says, incandescently stupid. That's
Yeah.
that's what that would have been.
Yeah, I could not. I couldn't imagine what your life would be like, dealing with.
Yeah.
But I have had the thought of, like, oh, Bodhi needs a partner. Bodhi needs a friend. And I could almost maybe see getting another one like a year from now. Because this is the first dog I've ever had, so, I didn't know what I was in for, but he's great, and I tell people all the time, I fell in love with this breed because a friend of mine I was, babysitting another English Cocker Spaniel,
Oh,
and, just fell in love with this dog, and I was thinking I'm either gonna, like, steal this dog, or
definitely.
I'm gonna have to get my own. And found a breeder, and went down to Alabama. I always joke that this was a dog. It was a rescue. We rescued Bodie from Alabama. Um, and uh, if you're looking for a dog, check out English Cocker Spaniels. They're in my opinion, they are the best dogs. Just so loyal and fun, but super, super high energy, especially as puppies.
This was my favorite non sequitur of the day, but also now listeners know to stay tuned for a year from now
See
because
if we
there's
get a
gonna,
second one.
yeah, there'll be this,
Let's see who goes
eh,
first.
there'll be this pressure campaign, I'm sure, among folks, for us to get more dogs. The thing I'm trying to ward off right now is chickens. She wants chickens, but that's a conversation for another day. Um,
Hannah wants chickens.
Yeah, I know. We don't
It,
have room for chicken. I don't even eat eggs. I mean, I'm not allergic to eggs. I just don't ever cook eggs. So why would I want unlimited eggs? I don't know. It's like a thing right now, though. It's like
no,
people are
raising
really into
chickens.
getting
Yeah, yeah,
chickens. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And the price of eggs is, you're saving money too.
Well, I said to her today that the thing I want to save money on is coffee, and because coffee prices, I don't know if you saw, and I want to jump back to Comey in a second, but coffee
Yeah.
prices, while we're on the subject, have gone up 40% over a year ago in the United States. 40%. That's why it's so expensive when you go to the coffee shop, and it's a combination of Trump's tariffs and some of the retaliatory actions of other countries. It's caused coffee prices to completely skyrocket. And, you know, I also found out it would be very hard to grow our own coffee beans. You need you need
Yeah.
mountains and altitude
You
and
mountains
the
built.
right climate. So
You
which
have to
none
move
of
out
which
to
I
Shenandoah.
yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah.
But
Well, one that just to get philosophical for a second, because I
yeah,
enjoy this conversation because most of the Substacks, lives I do are, and you as well, are these weighty issues. Everything's very serious. Things are really bad. September and October have been absolutely awful for our democracy, for our
yeah.
country, getting worse. Um, and you need to, you could be, we could be there's no shortage of things to concern yourself about in the world, and at any time that you're alive, that's going to be true. And often you think like, oh, you're going through the worst period ever, or the thing that you're dealing with in front of your face is far worse than any of our predecessors, and that's usually not true. And you just have to remember not to be completely overwhelmed and defined by the bad stuff that you and I talk about, think about, write about, consume every single day. That you have to have a part of your life that escapes that, whether it's
Mhm.
family, friends, pets, meditating, exercise, and that's never more important. And I think like in a lot of the discussions and in our little world, it's important sometimes to like bring that into the conversation. There's like a really important wellness part of life that I have found this year is more important than ever. So
Yeah,
I
I
like
had
I like
someone
talking about that because I think a lot of people who watch this stuff also are consumed by it and need to be need to be reminded.
yeah, I mean, to that end, as we hopped on, I had Hannah messaging me and saying, "Hey, when are you done?" Because, we'll have dinner and that sort of thing, but I'll do a, several hour just news digital blackout because you just do. Sometimes you gotta turn all the devices off and go outside, do a hike, something like that. It's really important right now. And earlier today, I was having conversations with our subscribers, and someone had asked, how do you keep up with all the news of the day? And look, like you, Ryan, I'm a frenetic consumer of the latest, but also very militant about guarding my time and shutting off. So
Yeah.
as tuned in as I am to everything, I have an almost clinical ability to also tune out really fast. That's the only way I stay sane is to shift and to not care what's happening on my phone, email inbox, news site for a few hours, and to do that with regularity. And I think that's important
That
for other folks to to
that's
to hear
impressive.
other people doing that.
It's impressive and it's really, really important. And it allows you, when you go back into it, it allows you to process what's actually happening in a more sophisticated way. I think you have to remove yourself, and your subconscious is processing things all the time. But if you're just glued to your phone, getting bombarded by social media news alerts, you don't actually have the opportunity to sort of look at the big picture, step back, think about what's going on. So it's not only important for your mental health, it actually will help you do your job as a content creator much better. While we're on this, Miles, I don't want to totally derail the conversation, but what do you do for you have a dog, you have a family, you have a baby still. What do you do in terms of like what's your go-to wellness to keep yourself sane?
It only would have been funnier, Ryan, if you were like, so what day's leg day? You know?
Exactly, exactly.
What day's leg day?
Uh,
The honest answer is
this could be a
like
side project for us. This could be a little side project Substack. It's just like
people are like
a
people are like,
wellness channel.
I came for the news analysis, but I left with like great advice to reset life. But here's an honest answer to that. Is like, you and I both get very sucked into the news of the day, both watching it and participating in it and sometimes breaking it. And you realize when you get a little bit out of balance. And I had one of those relatively recently, and in part because so many different things were happening at the same time. And I have wanted to, in this window, be as helpful to people who are in the crosshairs as humanly possible. And maybe, there's probably someone watching right now who's a licensed therapist who's saying, oh, it doesn't shock me that, Miles and his family went through a traumatic episode. And now his pathway out of it is wanting to help as many people as possible who end up in those circumstances. But given the pace of what's happening in Washington, there's a lot of people to help right now, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of things going down, and I don't talk about all of it publicly. A lot of it, I do privately. But when your calendar goes Chernobyl on you, you can't turn away. And so the past couple of weeks have been trying to just reinsert more discipline into the calendar. Waking up at the same time, going to bed early, building in fitness time, building in reading time. That one always ends up on the chopping block. And I suspect
Reading.
that, yeah, it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
easy to push it off.
Yeah.
And it's also so powerful to get reminded anytime you sit down and you dive back into a book for more than 30 minutes, how useful it is in rearranging your thinking, allowing you to synthesize across ideas and disciplines. It's tremendous for
Absolutely.
creativity. And so I've been trying to force that one back into the rotation. The easiest time to do it is right after baby has fallen asleep. And I'm already in the mood because I've just read, 7 to 10 books for people ages 0 to 3. And
That's
so,
right. Sure.
I'm real tuned in. And so, baby falls asleep and I can dive into a novel. So, honestly, right now, I'm rereading Moby Dick is
Wow.
on the
That's
shelf.
fascinating.
It
That
well,
it
it's it's a great. I mean, I could go off for a long time on that front, but there's a number of reasons. But one of the reasons I wanted to right now is in the moment we are in is not dissimilar from the moment in which Moby Dick was written, which was
huh,
about a decade or so, maybe it was 2 decades before the Civil War. But the United States was very obviously
on top
torn
of it.
apart, and the book was written in part as an allegory for a broken country. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to read it with those eyes right now and see what I can take away.
Yeah, and I imagine I haven't read anything like Moby Dick in a while, I have to be very honest. And I imagine anything like that you are primed to look at in terms of lessons, that relate to what we're all witnessing every day in our day jobs with what's going on in the country and politics. Um, but
Well, and it was in that time period when Herman Melville wrote it. At first it didn't do very well. The book, like a lot of great artists, the book sort of flopped. People thought it was too long, and they didn't grasp that central allegory. But as
this sounds like
America,
me in high school.
yeah. And by the way, if you look up Ryan's high school publications, they're now on Amazon. You can go buy them, and they're masterworks. Um, but Melville publishes Moby Dick. It doesn't get the response he wants. It's meant to be a warning, in a sense, to the country. Anyone who's read it, I mean, the book is about this Pequod crew, this group of sailors, and this crazy captain on the ship, who is desperate to go get this white whale, this giant whale that had taken his leg. And everyone in the crew represents a different segment of American society. And that white whale, some people interpret to be literally the whiteness of America, and that pursuit of a white America and an effort to maintain slavery in the
Yeah,
country, and what that does to the psyche of the people on the boat, and what that means for the country writ large. But as the country plunged deeper towards civil war, people started to understand that allegory more that Herman Melville was conveying, and of course, it became a timeless classic and is regarded by a lot of folks as the greatest
Yeah.
American novel. And so anyway, you realize that some of these things, despite being 150, 175 years old, can have great relevance
Oh,
for the moment that we are in. So anyway, if anyone else wants to read Moby Dick with me, reread Moby Dick with me, come along for the ride. Maybe I've noticed a couple of our peers on Substack have started book clubs, and I haven't
well,
decided
okay,
whether to go join one or to
yeah.
start my own.
Well, maybe this is the start of something because some people in the chat have recommended we should start a book club. So we should talk about that offline.
And
Now, of course,
everyone's like, yes, please, let's start with Moby Dick. Please give us
yeah,
this
yeah.
thick tome. It's a fast way
Well,
for us to have 3 people in the book club.
well, so it's like I was an English major, Miles,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
literature was my thing in college, and only at the end of college did I kind of get sick of, frankly, the way that literature was taught at UC Berkeley, and become interested in journalism and politics, and I basically kind of think of that as going from this transition from like really, having to, read a lot of like Marxist literary criticism and a lot of the other garbage, frankly, that was being taught in the English departments at Berkeley and other
Oh
places.
man, I know it well.
Not to say there weren't amazing professors at Berkeley, and a great Shakespeare professor with a great 20th century American literature professor, and you gained so much from that. But it sort of alienated me from academia in a lot of ways, and that's what got me into politics and journalism. But I think back, I spent almost a year studying Joyce and Ulysses. Never actually even got to Finnegan's Wake; it was just too difficult. But and I you know and when I was younger, I always thought like I kind of wasted a year studying that stuff, and I should have been pursuing, journalism and political science a lot earlier in my college career. But now I look back at it and think like actually it was the perfect combination of more philosophical literary training and hardcore politics and journalism training when I made that transition.
That's
But if we want to
I
do Ulysses, I would love to pick up Ulysses with a book club because you can't read Ulysses on your own. It's too difficult. You have to have the pressure of a book club to
So
actually,
you have to have the
read.
pressure, and you have to crowdsource the analysis. There's so many different angles to pursue something like that. You need folks, in the chat and jumping in. What would also be very fun to get, really ambitious about it is sometimes in a book club, we could pull folks onto a Zoom that we then plug into Substack Live so that more faces and names can jump in and folks can exchange questions and thoughts, and
Yeah.
we can port that back into the app. Another one I would throw out there, Ryan, is Faulkner. I'm embarrassed to admit I am really thin on Faulkner, and I missed out. I missed that train, and
Yeah.
I got to dig back in there. And then another one that I had been diving into, and I usually don't have multiple books going at the same time, but in this case I did because, as you know, baby changes everything. But Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, another book
Huh. Wow.
that is
You put me to shame.
allegorical.
Yeah, this is incredibly impressive, Miles.
Well,
But
I'm telling you all about unfinished books that I'm reading.
yeah, but even,
More
even making an
impressive than
attempt.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Man would be really fun, and Magic Mountain would be fun for folks because this is another book written on the eve of war that's an allegorical story about society. And there
Mm.
is something here. I'm sure, and I was not an English major, but I'm sure there's whole sections on how there's some of the greatest writers have written novels on the eve of, state or global conflict, and they've written these powerful allegorical stories that we then go back and say, "Oh my gosh, they
Yeah.
completely forecast it." So that's another one that right now is worth reading. And I think if I have it right, I think the Magic Mountain was in part one of the inspirations behind. No, I could be wrong about that. Grand Budapest Hotel, I was going to say, but
Oh,
but I
interesting.
think
Okay.
but I think I'm wrong about that. I think it's another book that I'm admiring that was a part
This is why
inspiration
we
for.
need a book club.
Yeah, anyway,
I've
people are
never
like,
read Magic
"What the
Mountain, so
hell is going on right now
I
with
know.
Miles and Ryan?" This is not the conversation I expected, but this is the conversation you
It's
got, folks, and you're welcome in advance.
No, as long as I always keep an eye on how many people are coming and going, and as long as that number is going up rather than down, you know that people are enjoying the conversation, and the chat is people in the chat can tell us if they want us to uh, s-
Even if
stop
everyone
talking,
left,
but
Ryan and I would still be having this
we're still
conversation.
still be
I
doing it.
I have to throw one last thing in there to correct myself. It was not the Magic Mountain. The World of Yesterday. A lot of folks have not even heard of this book. Stefan Zweig wrote this memoir. Gosh, this is another person on the eve of war who wrote another book. Um, he wrote a memoir called The World of Yesterday. Stefan Zweig was a biographer. He wrote the world famous biography of Marie Antoinette. So if you ever saw the movie Marie Antoinette, that was part of the source material, and he wrote all these famous biographies. He was very ensconced in the literary scene in pre-war Europe, and then the guy lives through the outbreak of World War One. I think he was an Austrian, and then on the eve of World War Two, he writes his memoirs. I mentioned The World of Yesterday. It's one of the greatest books I've ever written because it's like a time machine. It takes you back into what life was like very viscerally in Western Europe on the eve of war, what that felt like, what it looked like, hyperinflation, the increasing introduction of the use of state force against protesters and dissent, a lot of things that we're seeing in the world right now. Unfortunately, Stefan Zweig published that memoir and killed himself right on the eve of the outbreak of World War II because he couldn't stand to see his continent descend again into chaos. But if folks want to go, this is different than a lot of the books about World War II that you would read. If folks want a really fascinating time capsule in the look and feel of pre-war Europe and some of the parallels to today, they should pick that up. And that is the book, by the way, that inspired the film The Grand Budapest Hotel. So
All right,
anyway,
very
anyway,
well.
we've tabbed deep into the conversation. This
We
is like one
have,
of
and
those
I
Word
do.
documents. Yeah.
I think we should seriously consider a book club. The danger is that it'll end up being, contemporary politics and nonfiction, when what we really want is to focus on stuff that just takes us away from all the other stuff we're talking about, the other, 23 out of 24 hours a day. Um, but maybe there's a way to come up with a syllabus that you know is a book a month that has a lesson, a fiction, a work of literature that has an important lesson, the way that you have rediscovered Moby Dick, and see some of the how it applies today. Um, the last really meaty thing I've read, and I will confess, I got the audio version and the physical version, and I flipped back and forth depending on whether I was taking a walk or just sitting down on the couch or in bed. Was something very almost too on the nose, but is Ian Kershaw's 2-volume biography of Adolf Hitler. Um, there's been a been sitting around on my bookshelves for a long, long time, and I finally.
That's usually what two volumes do. Is they sit around
Yeah,
unread. They're really good bookends.
yeah, well, yeah, although those books have, like, big swastikas on them, so sometimes I would, like, turn them around because it's kind of like, it's a really this is really important biography, and, I know there's a more recent Hitler biography that's considered, perhaps even better, but for many years, that was the gold standard, for a
I'm so
biography.
sad that you just took the legs out of the hit piece written on Ryan Liz at some point. Someone was getting ready to say, I went to his apartment and he had Nazi paraphernalia.
Yeah, I mean, even I was looking, my girlfriend and I had a friend over, and we were looking at Hunter S. Thompson's 72 book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, and I had forgotten that the cover of that book is a skull that I did not know this until last night. Looking at it again, is supposed to be Nixon, but in his eyes are in the original cover um, are two swastikas. Um, Hunter S.
No
Thompson's
way.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72 has swastikas on it, and I think that's gone out of fashion a little bit to decorate your books with, even obviously the book was it was a commentary on Nixon. He was calling Nixon, a fascist. But anyway, as you can imagine, reading Ian Kershaw's 2-volume biography of Hitler, you can't help but notice in the early period of the book, the rise of the Nazis, you will come across a lot of parallels. I'm not saying what we're witnessing in the United States is Hitler. I'm not even comparing MAGA, and I know a lot of people will disagree with this, but not even comparing them to the Nazis. But authoritarian governments everywhere have a signature, and you will find that signature on page after page if you read any of those histories. And just to throw one thing out so we can get back into our discussion, Miles, this is sort of random, but one of the things that really struck me in that biography, and I'm sure people have made this point before, is the beer hall push and the early gangsterism of the Nazis when they were obviously extremists, radicals who nobody thought would ever gain power. Hitler, of course, was sent to jail for his role in that that early coup attempt. When they act, and all of that stuff was considered fringe, obviously not celebrated by the state in any way. It was condemned, and it was embarrassing to be associated with it. Once they got in power, they turned all of that into state propaganda to celebrate, and including this very famous footage you often see in documentaries of Hitler visiting this memorial. And one of those scenes that it was filmed at the time and is reused all the time in these documentaries is him at this site celebrating the early coup attempt. So they turned all of their crimes into things to be honored, celebrated, monuments built towards to them. And again, I'm not certainly not, I'm not comparing. There's no Holocaust. What Trump has done does not compare to the crimes of the Nazis, obviously. Um, but I cannot help but notice the way that January 6th has been transformed into one of the worst chapters in American history and a crime, gradually into something to be celebrated. And, at the rate we're going, by the end of the Trump term, it won't just be the pardons. There'll be like a monument to the January 6th coup attempt. And that is a kind of classic sign of an authoritarian government, is just turning what were considered beyond the pale crimes of the early days of the gang that eventually gets in power into things for the state to celebrate.
I am so glad that you said that. I'm looking for something in my notes here. That's why I'm looking down, and it may take me a minute to find it. But um, there is there's a section of my last book that I wrote where I laid out a bunch of these parallels, and my publisher and my editor ended up striking it. And I don't think part of it was for length. Like anyone, I wrote way too much, and we had to neck it down. But also there was a lot of sensitivity in that moment about people drawing parallels between the Third Reich and what we are witnessing. But it is really tough to go into a book about the 1930s and you're in Europe and to not see extraordinary parallels to this moment. That doesn't, of course, mean we end up there, but it
Exactly.
means that history,
Exactly.
it rhymes, it echoes, and those echoes tell us something about trend lines and where we could be headed. And those are, flashing red bulbs to say, hey, pay attention. We've seen this story before.
Absolutely, and this is why I am careful to put some caveats on these comparisons, because I do think it is important to keep the uniqueness of the Holocaust in mind and not to casually compare the crimes that the Nazis ended up committing to anything in in modern history. Um, but the rise to power and this, like I said, authoritarian governments all have a signature, and they don't all end up in the same place. They don't all last that long. They obviously don't end up committing the kind of horrific crimes that the Nazis did. Um, but you got to go back through these periods in history to understand and to be discriminating about uh, what is relevant, what is similar, and what is different. Um, you know, uh, Another great book on this is Hitler's 30 Days to Power, which is just a
Mm-hmm.
very tight focus on those 30 days. And a lot's been written about this. That's a great book to read, and you'll see a lot of parallels. And the biggest takeaway off the top of my head from that is just the way that corporations in Germany, the moneyed interests, all and many political leaders all thought that these guys were such a joke, and that Hitler was could be controlled, and they all accommodated themselves to his rise. And he played these factions off each other, obviously continually pointing to the danger of the communists. And a lot of people who should have known better, including some of the major media companies, decided, okay, he's the least bad of the options during that turbulent period, and they would back him because they believed they could control him. I cannot tell you how many Republican members of the House I had conversations with in 2015 and 16 who believed the same thing about Trump. And we see corporations and media who think that the path of least resistance is to accommodate Trump, accommodate MAGA, make peace with it, and it won't come for you. So yeah, and these are um, these are important conversations to have, but I think it's also, I see a lot of people in the comments saying, "No, you shouldn't caveat it. He is a Nazi." The parallels are obvious, and you just have to um, you have to recognize what is similar and what is different. Um, but I don't think it should shut a conversation down immediately the way maybe it used to make some of these conversations, especially the early periods.
Well, I to that end, I found just this snippet that my editor cut, and it starts off like this: History warns us to be wary of a leader who pretends to be a quote man of the people, but detests working men and women, who acts like a deal maker, but easily breaks promises, who ignores experts, but is said to be quote seduced by himself during his own speeches, who calls for opponents to be locked up, but frets about getting convicted himself, who manipulates the media for personal gain but attacks the quote lying press as enemies, who vows to root out corruption but abuses official powers, who claims to have the best lieutenants but surrounds himself with sycophants, who relishes supporters' violence but keeps enough distance to avoid charges of incitement, who knows small lies are not believable but quote big lies become gospel, and who builds his course around a pledge to make the country great again while threatening its very foundations. This is a description of Adolf Hitler drawn from biographies of the man. Others have sought to follow in his footsteps. Obviously, there's a lot of things in that 10-point list that are parallels to today. And that's why I think it is important to study history, is not to just score political points by saying, look, this person is a Nazi, but to understand those trend lines and those similarities, and then derive from that what we can learn about a current moment in our politics and how to affect its trajectory.
Incredible. It's too bad that that was cut. And, one
Yeah.
more, I was
Damn
having
you,
a
editors! I'll paste it into the
well,
chat for
you
folks.
should write yeah, you should write about it. And, one other thing I'll just point out there, since we're having this very free-flowing conversation about lessons from books we've read. There's a really interesting idea in Ian Kershaw's work about how the bureaucrats in the Nazi regime, uh, worked and competed. As people may or may not remember, um, all the senior people below Hitler kind of all hated each other, competed. It was very factionalized, and Hitler played people off of each other, and people rose and fell depending on what they were doing for him. And Kershaw developed this idea that he called working toward the Führer, um, and basically, you know, because Hitler didn't, wasn't necessarily a details guy, didn't understand the bureaucracy. People below him did, and the way that people satisfied the Führer was by essentially out extreming each other, um, and using Mein Kampf, Hitler's speeches, statements, maybe even private conversations, his vibe, his general, what you believed he would do if he had your job. And um, that's how he described the sort of competitive nature of the bureaucrats, the senior bureaucrats, especially in the Nazi regime, and it led to um, this constant attempt by bureaucrats to please him, to gain his favor by coming up with schemes, plans, new departments that the bureaucrats believed if Hitler were in their job, he himself would do. And boy, when Kershaw lays that out in that book, it really reminds you of the way that this the Trump's senior aides work with Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance and Hegseth and Bondi and Christy Nome, all trying to maintain their place in Trump's orbit, to stay in his good graces. These are all, if I could psychoanalyze them a little bit, deeply insecure people who never thought that they would be at this level of government, and probably rightfully so, have a certain degree of imposter syndrome. And they're not people who are uh, necessarily going to have great careers after this service. And so pleasing Trump and succeeding in the Trump administration is the most important mission of their lives. Um, and I think that's why you see a lot of the competition to out crazy each other between, especially that group I mentioned: Nome, Hegseth, Bondi. Even Rubio gets in on this act now. Vance, and Miller. It's like Trump doesn't know how to run the Justice Department, but what would if Trump were doing it? Pam Bondi thinks, what would he do? And it it's basically trying to read his mind based on all of the Trumpian instincts and vibes that we're familiar with. And but what it does lead to is um, each of the senior people basically trying to out extreme each other to impress the boss.
Well, and I think we can announce today that next year Simon and Schuster publishes Ryan's new book, Hitler Vibes. That's
That
out
wasn't the right
next.
word. That wasn't the right word.
It's out next April 20th. Hitler Vibes by Ryan Lizza. No, that's not real,
Oh
folks. That's not
man.
real. I don't, you probably could write that book, and it would be a way to tell Gen Z about history. Um,
Yeah.
I
But you
think
might be onto something here.
those parallels are remarkable to note. There's another author who, of course, very famously uh, distilled that phenomenon. Friedrich Hayek's timeless book, The Road to Serfdom, has a whole chapter devoted to this. And I think that chapter is called Why the Worst Rise to the Top.
Mm,
And I think he published Road to Serfdom probably in 1945, 1946. And, so he is contemporaneously investigating this, like, how the hell did we end up in such a short few years with all of these psychos in these
yeah,
top government posts? How did this happen? And he breaks it down quasi philosophically, but it's quite simple when you boil it down, which is basically the worst rise to the top, because
it's
you have to be pretty unscrupulous to outdo the next person who's trying to be fawning to the leader. You have to sort of out criminal them and
yeah,
be willing to cut more corners, be less forgiving towards adversaries. You have to be the baddest bad guy to
yeah,
keep rising to the top. And so you do see people trying to outdo one another in terms of how they flatter the leader. And it's really difficult to watch a cabinet meeting in the White House today and not see echoes of that as people go around the room and in more and more both lucid
yes,
and lurid
yes.
language try to fawn over the leader. And I remember the very first cabinet meeting in the first Trump administration felt a little bit like that. It was, if you watched them side by side, if you have, I guess that would take you 5 hours, because I think the first one was an hour and a half. I think the most recent one was 3.5 hours. But if you have 5 hours to devote to this, go watch the side by side of the first Trump cabinet meeting and then the first Trump cabinet meeting of the second administration. And what you will see is, yes, the first time around, people fawning over him, but it doesn't even compare to the surreal language and the conversations about he being, him being the gift from God and on a divine mission, and all of these things folks were saying in the most recent one. And I can remember in that first one, though, even even the fawning comments that were made in the room were unlike anything we'd seen in a cabinet meeting before. And John Kelly leaves that meeting, and I'm there with him at the White House, and one of the things that had struck me about the conversation is there were only two people at the table, only two, who in their remarks during the cabinet meeting didn't lavish praise on the president, and it was John Kelly and Jim Mattis. And the two of them took the opportunity to speak, knowing that the cameras were in the room, instead of talking about the one man in front of them, to talk about the millions of men and women they represented in their workforces in that job, which is the right thing to do. You're not
Yeah.
a cabinet secretary for the president. You are a cabinet secretary overseeing a department or agency and entrusted with the care of the men and women and their mission in that department and agency. And I thought it was very notable that it was only the four-star Marine generals in the room that took that approach to the president and felt very averse to the idea that they should be using that conversation to praise him. Now, of course, those types of folks are no longer in the executive branch, but it's noteworthy the example that Kelly and Mattis set in that moment is that they showed that people of character were not going to be pursuing the president's favor. But of course, that's been met with consequences. Trump has made very clear if you're a person like that, you're not going to hang around for very long.
I mean, how much do you have to hate yourself to humiliate yourself before the eyes of the world with these ritualistic cabinet meetings where everyone just, honors the leader? I mean, can you imagine Marco Rubio 10 years ago if someone could flash before him a clip of what he's going to be doing in 2025? That's the thing that I'll never get over is just how do you live with yourself? How do you go home to your family and be like, "Yeah, honey, great day at work today. I spent 5 minutes, just, lavishing praise on Donald Trump in this, like, totally humiliating and embarrassing spectacle." I mean, how do you explain that to your kids that is the most important part of maintaining your job is that if you don't do that, your boss will get rid of you? I don't know. I've been in some, bunch of big institutions. I've never worked in an institution where that was the norm in any meeting. You see some sucking up to the boss here and there in meetings, but people are just generally have too much pride and are not willing to completely humiliate and embarrass themselves in front of their colleagues to do something that looks straight out of North Korea. Um, so that stuff just I still can't believe that um, is a normal part of this administration, and it's done unironically at every one of these meetings. It is one of the most bizarre things we witness on a regular basis, and it's really important to remind yourselves how fucking bizarre this is.
It is, and I know we have to wrap here. I will just say, and I didn't write about this previously, but for a longer conversation, I'll go into it. But I can remember so many episodes like this in the first Trump administration, where behind the scenes, cabinet members and White House officials were confessing the truth about the president, increasingly scared to say it, but then planning how they were gonna go out and, bear hug whatever the latest, craziest thing the president said was. And there was one episode where, uh, me and a group of, you know, folks that you would know from the Trump orbit had a retreat out at a cabin in Virginia to go talk about some of these concerns about the president's mental health and fitness and what was happening with the administration and how crazy things were getting. And it was still so clearly these were folks that were concerned enough. It was still remarkable if you had been in that room, the knots people were trying to tie themselves in to justify continuing to be MAGA, but then, like, how do we, get the president into a better place? And I wish I'd tape recorded it. I wish I'd had a, audio or video recording of this because for like 6 hours, I sat there, drinking sodas and leaning back in my chair and saying, but guys, like, for pardon my language, but what the fuck are we talking about here? The guy's totally crazy, right? We all agree he's totally crazy and he's scary and it's putting people in danger. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we should all resign and say that. I mean, it's just like, but then you'd have someone else be like, yeah, but I mean, we can't do that, and then they'd move on. You're like, well, wait, why can't we do that? This job isn't so important to any of us that it's not like we're going to have it forever. These jobs don't pay that much in government. Like, what are we waiting for? And that was part of the frustration that built up and led me to ultimately just, do it on my own, is because they were so scared to turn against the guy publicly, but there would just be these hand-wringing conversations. It was like rhetorical Twister, folks bending their legs unnaturally around their shoulder to their face and their nose. And you're like, I can't believe you can do that, but you think it's hard to just go out and tell the truth. But apparently that's not an artifact of
Yeah.
history that people have dealt with that.
And you're more familiar with this conversation and argument than almost anyone, because I believe in your original op-ed you wrestled with this, but it leads to the question of what is the proper thing for a government official in the Trump administration now, someone who wants to be responsible, somebody who certainly doesn't want to violate the law and wants to prevent the worst things from happening. What's the right thing to do? Is it to resign and leave and go public when you are pretty sure that someone a lot worse is going to replace you, or is it to try and stay and be as responsible as you can? I know you've thought and written quite a bit about this, Miles, and my opinion about this in 2017 when Trump first came into office. I remember the first thing I wrote at the New Yorker the night that Trump was elected. I wrote this probably at, I don't know, midnight, 1 a.m., was an argument that on the side of uh, good people need to go into this government and help and make sure bad shit doesn't happen. That was a big debate at the time. And I think people have, go back and forth on this question. What's your view of that these days?
Uh, I think I think it's both. Both need to be true. There are some people who are in a position where my heuristic became when saying no is no longer enough. that's when you leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the first year of the Trump administration, we were quite successful in preventing the Department of Homeland Security from being turned into the junior Gestapo, from being turned into the president's pocket police, from being politicized. How do you know that? Well, simply look at the Department of Homeland Security today, and I would like you to compare it to the Department of Homeland Security in year one of the Trump administration. He wanted to do all of these things in year one. These things didn't happen. So we were largely, by that metric, successful in preventing it from becoming that. But by year two, a lot of the things we were telling the White House were illegal or we couldn't do. The president was just blowing past that advice, ignoring the lawyers, wanted to do it anyway. So when saying no is no longer enough, well, then you got to look at that next set of options, which is fine. Then I need to go sound the alarm for people who can stop the guy from doing things that are unlawful. But I took a similar perspective, Ryan. Even this go around, Trump 2.0, I did the exact same thing at like 1 a.m. the night Trump won this year. Wrote a New York Times op-ed for them to place the next morning, which they did. And they said, talk about whatever you want. And the one thing I talked about was, I know it sounds ironic coming from me, guy who quit the first administration and blaze of glory, but I would urge Republicans of conscience, go into this
Stay.
administration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is we want people who are willing, they don't have to be willing to advance my view of conservatism, which is apparently different than most MAGA people. They just need to be willing to tell the White House not to do illegal things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
Just a
all I want from
basic,
this
yeah.
administration, by the
Bar
way.
so low.
Yeah, I'm not hoping that Donald Trump becomes a liberal or a moderate. Frankly, I don't give a shit right now. The only thing that matters to me is that the president of the United States abide by the law. That's what I care about. I disagreed with Joe Biden on a lot of things. I'm not a Democrat. I am not a progressive in my views, but I was quite content for a president to be there to abide by the law. I probably align on a number of issues closer, even with folks that are MAGA today, than I do the Democratic Party, but none of that matters right now, because the one issue that matters to me is that we have a president that abides by the law. And to me, we so clearly do not. And that is what colors my thinking in terms of recommending people go in or don't go into public service is if you think you have the ability and the spinal fortitude to speak truth to power, please go into government and do that, whether it's in the White House or another layer of government. If you don't think you do, if you think you're going to be cowed and you're the type of person who's going to do whatever the leader wants, legal or illegal, then I don't really want you to go into government.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, I think that's the absolute right way to view this. And I think you've been very influential, and I would not be surprised, and I'm sure you know this firsthand. There are a lot of people in government who look to you and to your advice and when they were wrestling with that question, because you have been more outspoken on that issue than anyone. And it's really everything you have done since leaving government, Miles, has been extraordinarily impressive. You could have just gone off and lived your life. But that advice is spot on. And I knew you retain, your actual conservative views because of the way that you can cite Hayek without, without notes.
Well, you go into these, and by the way, I'm very grateful for subscribers to Treason who know, some of you in here know we have like really different politics. And I love that we can caucus together for democracy. And that's great. And it will also be really fun one day to go back into some meaty policy debates on, issues where we disagree. But those things are so far from my conscience right now, because what matters is we preserve the foundations of the republic. And to that end, Ryan, I will say, this was totally unplanned in the conversation, but I think we're onto something with maybe getting a book club going here. And folks, Ryan and we'll offline about that. And
At the very least, we should do a chat like this more regular. Always love talking to you, Miles. So let's make sure we do this, once a week, whenever you want, because I really enjoy it.
Likewise, my friend. Great to be with you. I almost said people have a great Friday. I so wish I did.
I
I
thought the
did.
same way. That's so funny. I
I
was thinking the same thing.
I
Never
do hope
mind.
people have a great Friday when Friday comes around. But don't give up hope. Other good things could happen this week besides just a fun conversation with me and Ryan. Yes, we will do this again soon, my friend. We'll talk about whether we should read some books in the process. And if I don't talk to you before Saturday, and if I don't see other folks here before Saturday, I hope that people who are going out there around the country and exercising their First Amendment rights this weekend are peaceful and lawful, and don't give in to the temptation to go argue with folks who might want to bait you into being anything less than civil. So I hope that folks are out there proudly exercising those rights this weekend and staying safe. And if you have a blow up green frog costume, I envy you. I am seeing that they are sold out all over the place. So anyway, have a great time out there, folks. And Ryan, always great to be with you, my friend. Any parting words on your end?
No, it's been a pleasure. Just want to let's talk offline, but we should do this more often. And let's think seriously about the book clubs. My concern with that is committing to it. It's a big commitment, but if there's interest, we should do it. But your Substack has been such a great addition to this little universe. And if you're not a paid subscriber and you're watching this live stream, go sign up, become a paid subscriber if you can afford it. And I would, humbly ask you do the same for Tellus News. And let's collaborate a lot more, Miles. These conversations are fantastic.
Awesome.
You are a national treasure. I'll
Right
talk to
back
you
at you,
soon.
my friend. And so is Bodie. And
I gotta
we'll
go. I gotta go take Bodie out for a walk. He's getting.
you, you go take Bodie out. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.
See you guys.